We began with our essential question, which was asking, how did the expansion of the United States affect different groups of people? So far, we've been looking at the Northwest Ordinance. We've started to see how different groups have been affected, but today we're really going to get into a pretty serious question that came up during the time of westward expansion. It's going to be really important for us to keep the following message in mind, because everything that we're doing is talking about during the westward expansion period, during that time. So this is here just to remind us that as you're doing your work today, we're really going to be looking at the perspectives and opinions of people back during the time period that we're studying. So the activator today was a bit of a message around the fact that this is placing the lesson in the historical context of the time. So it really set the scene for students to know that as we're engaging in these sources today, we're not debating slavery. We're not here to share if in 2024 slavery is acceptable or not. That's a done deal. Instead, it's really having students think through, okay, so we're looking at these artifacts that are explicitly sharing with us the perspectives of people of the time. And by framing that at the start, they know that when they go off to work in their groups and they really are investigating those sources, then they know, okay, so here's a point in the lesson where we have to be thinking critically. We need to be really pulling out the pieces that are the supportive evidence. We want to make sure that we can specifically say, in this part of the resource, it's communicating this messaging. And so because they have that framework at the start, they're already prepped and ready to go in and start thinking critically and collaborating with others and debating and doing all of those great high-level activities that we want to see them doing. This word economy here, can you say the word economy? Economy. Follow economy. Excellent. So the economy is going to talk about the way people and businesses make their money and how they spend their money. And in the North and the South region, back during the time of westward expansion, people in the North and South made and spent their money in many different ways. At first, we did explicitly define the word, and that was really to provide an entry point for students who maybe did not remember it from second grade, or for students who are learning English as their second language, and even for students who don't have anything specific that would impact their ability to understand, but maybe just are not familiar with it. I had them repeat it back to me so that they could say it and begin to use it. And then when I was working with the different groups, if I heard them alluding to that topic, if they were talking about the crops or they were talking about the factories, I would then intentionally input that word or insert it so that they could then hear it in context, and also I encourage them to then use it as well. So let's take a look at how, as the country grew, different economies looked a little bit different from one another. So we have two illustrations here, and each of these illustrations were created in the year 1850. The one on the left here is going to show us a factory right here in Massachusetts. The one on the right is going to show us a cotton plantation in Georgia. We had factories, like I said, and they made money by paying immigrants really, really low wages. They did not pay them the amount of money that they really deserved for all of the work that they were doing. Meanwhile, on plantations down in Georgia, they were making money by buying people from Africa. They actually were buying people or their children, and they made them work for free. Do you think that that disagreement will cause a problem?
More pollution and more people would be dying.
Yeah.
I feel like being in crops is less dangerous than being in a factory. Because being in a factory, you could get stuck under stuff, you could get burned, or...
So there are a lot of risks to both, but if we think about kind of the human aspect of things, and if you think about the treatment of people, which one do we really want spreading across the nation through westward expansion? The factories.
Because they make more money. But I think the crops would be a better option because, first of all, it's necessary. It's not
us survive.
It's not a want, it's a need. And crops are a need.
If you think about how those crops are being grown and the treatment of the people that are doing that work, is there a trade-off, right? Is there something that maybe we should consider in addition to what they're producing? There's an interesting breakdown of where the free states and where the slave states are going to be. Green F represents the free states. The red S represents the slave states. What are you noticing about the distribution or the number of free states and slave states? How many of each do we see?
A lot of the free slaves are in the northeast, like up top, and most of like the slaves are in
the southeast, exactly. So we see a lot of the freedom in the north and a lot of slavery in the south. How many of each do you see? What observations can we make about the quantity of these states?
There were like 11 free states and then 10 slave states. So that makes the slave states like one less.
Missouri wants to join the Union. You are going to be exploring the documents. You are going to underline evidence that shows the opinion about whether they think there should be slavery or not in the new states. And then you will record your thinking. For students with specific learning needs, I really was honing in on their ability to access the texts and how they could then record their thinking about it. So many of the students in my class who do have unique learning profiles, a lot of it comes down to the literacy elements and really getting their thoughts on paper. So when I was with those groups, I was asking them to share out with me what they had recorded, and we talked through where in the text that was found, helping them to kind of pinpoint and orient themselves really specifically to the artifact that was giving them that information. What does Abraham Lincoln think, Faith? What are your thoughts on this?
This was the beginning of the Civil War and how it started. Some people wanting to end slavery, and the other wanting to fight for it to keep on being something they could do.
What did they end up valuing or prioritizing?
Slave state. They didn't really want it, I think, but they wanted to be a free state, but they needed more money to be, so they became a slave state.
That sounds like a really hard predicament to be in when you're trying to expand and start something new. Who's affected? Who feels it? If the United States is not able to keep up the balance, right? If you think about the balance of something, in the free states, you have the fair treatment. In the slave states, you do not. So who is affected if they become slave states?
What does slave mean?
What does slave mean? That's a really great question. So that means that people had to work. They had to do really, really hard work, but they did not get any money. They got no money, and they worked so hard. Why? Exactly. That is not good. No way. Who would be affected? The people that owned the plantations, the owners, or the people that were working?
The people that are working.
The people that are working. So we can say the workers. How were they affected? How? What did they feel like?
Sad.
What else? Well, they felt. Give me a whole sentence.
They feel sad.
Because, who's going to stretch it out? Go ahead, Elise.
She don't have really. Because she don't have really.
You got it. They felt sad because.
They sad because they gonna work, but the other people they're gonna give them money.
Yeah,
exactly. There were a few groups who I was very surprised by in a positive way, because I expected to get some pretty literal answers about, they needed some more crops, and so they were going to go here. But then they really started to think through like the human element. They were starting to take the concrete information that was being targeted around the economy and slave versus free states, and they started to expand it to a more widespread global empathy perspective. One move that I made today was I did intentionally put students whose native language is not English in a group with students who do speak English as their first language. That kind of support and being able to talk through it with their peers is not only great for their language development, but it's also really important for them to feel like they're a part of the community and not off to the side.
Slave and half free. So I think they're trying to make more free states than slave states, so the free states can overpower the slaves. So there's the free states.
So I hear a pretty strong opinion about what should be happening coming out of this quote. What do you think might happen if California were to join as a slave state?
A lot more people would become slaves and would not be able to be with their families the time, and all they would be able to do was work.
What do you think?
I feel like California right now is a free state.
California does join as a free state. Really, really good news, right? So what do you think then the impact of joining as a free state could be?
that there would be thousands of people would not be enslaved anymore.
Thousands.
And they would finally be able to go back to their families, maybe get a house and get a job and finally get paid.
Amazing. That sounds like the best outcome for everybody. So when I walk away in the next 5 minutes, I want you to underline some of the evidence in here, or even circle a part of the picture that really showed that thinking.